The emergency room buzzed with its usual chaos of beeping machines, hurried footsteps, and urgent voices. Dr. Marcus Chen had seen it all during his 8 years as a trauma surgeon, but something about the woman on Gurney 7 made him pause. She lay perfectly still, her breathing controlled despite the obvious pain etched across her weathered face. Most patients with her injuries would be crying out, demanding attention, or at least showing some sign of distress. Not her. Sarah Mitchell kept her eyes fixed on the ceiling tiles, counting them methodically as she had learned to do years ago when pain became unbearable. The motorcycle accident had left her with a dislocated shoulder, 3 cracked ribs, and road rash that painted angry red streaks across her left arm. But physical pain was something she understood, something she could manage. It was the concerned faces of the medical staff that made her uncomfortable. "Ma'am, we need to get you into X-ray," said a young nurse named Jessica, her voice gentle but persistent. "Can you tell us your pain level on a scale of 1 to 10? "I'm fine," Sarah replied, her voice steady and clipped. She had given the same response to every question since the ambulance brought her in 2 hours ago. Name, age, emergency contact, medical history, insurance information. She answered what was necessary and nothing more. Jessica exchanged a worried glance with Dr. Chen. In her 3 years of nursing, she had never encountered a patient so stoic in the face of obvious trauma. Most people would be asking for pain medication by now, but this woman seemed almost indifferent to her injuries. Dr. Chen approached the bedside, his experienced eyes taking in details that others might miss. The way Sarah held herself despite the pain suggested military training. Her responses were precise, economical, as if she had been taught to reveal nothing unnecessary. But it was her eyes that caught his attention most. They held a distance, a guardedness that spoke of experiences far beyond a simple traffic accident. "Mrs. Mitchell," Dr. Chen said, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "I know you said you're fine, but your body is telling a different story. We need to make sure there's no internal bleeding or other complications we can't see." Sarah finally turned her head to look at him. For a moment, something flickered across her features. Recognition, perhaps, or surprise. Dr. Chen's bearing, the way he carried himself, reminded her of someone from another life. Someone she had tried very hard to forget. "Just do what you need to do, Doc," she said quietly. "I can handle it." The X-ray technician, a burly man named Tom, wheeled her to the imaging department. As he positioned her for the films, he noticed something unusual. Despite her injuries, Sarah moved with a fluid precision that seemed almost automatic. When he asked her to hold certain positions, she complied without hesitation, even when it clearly caused her pain. "You military?" Tom asked casually as he prepared the machine. Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Used to be. Army? Navy." Tom nodded, understanding. He had served in the Marines himself and recognized the signs. The way she controlled her breathing during painful movements, the way she followed orders without question, the way she seemed to view her injuries as just another obstacle to overcome. Back in the emergency department, Dr. Chen studied Sarah's X-rays with growing concern. The images showed old injuries alongside the new ones, healed fractures in her left wrist, evidence of surgery on her right knee, and what looked like shrapnel scars in her shoulder blade. This woman had seen combat, and recently. When he returned to her bedside, Sarah was staring at the ceiling again, her breathing steady despite what had to be considerable pain. A young resident, Dr. Amanda Foster, was attempting to start an IV for pain medication. "I don't need anything for pain," Sarah said firmly, pulling her arm away. "Ma'am, with your injuries, you really should accept some relief," Dr. Foster insisted. "There's no reason to suffer unnecessarily." "I said no," Dr. Chen intervened gently. "Dr. Foster, why don't you check on the patient in room 3? I'll handle this." After the resident left, Dr. Chen sat down again. He had dealt with enough veterans to recognize the signs of someone who had learned not to show weakness, not to ask for help, not to trust easily. "You know," he said conversationally, "I spent 2 tours in Afghanistan, Navy Medical Corps. I've seen a lot of people try to tough it out when they didn't need to." Sarah's eyes snapped to his face, studying him with new intensity. She could see it now, the military bearing she had sensed earlier, the way he moved with purpose, the calm authority in his voice. But more than that, she could see something in his eyes that she recognized. He had been there in the places where people got broken and had to find ways to put themselves back together. "Afghanistan?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Kandahar province mostly. Forward operating bases, field hospitals. You? For a long moment, Sarah said nothing. Then, so quietly he had to lean closer to hear, she said, Helmand province. 3 deployments, Dr. Chen nodded slowly. Helmand had been one of the worst places during the height of the conflict. If she had done 3 tours there, she had seen things that would stay with her forever. What was your rating? He asked, using military terminology that felt more natural than civilian medical speak. Hospital corpsman, Sarah replied. Then, after a pause, HM2, Field Medical Service Technician. Dr. Chen felt a chill run down his spine. Hospital corpsmen who served with Marine units in places like Helmand were among the most elite medics in the military. They were the ones who ran into gunfire to reach wounded Marines, who performed emergency surgery under impossible conditions, who saved lives when there seemed to be no hope. Doc, Sarah said, and for the first time since she had arrived, her voice carried a note of vulnerability. I need you to understand something. I can't be weak. Not here, not now. There are people counting on me. What people? Dr. Chen asked gently. Sarah closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. The ones who didn't make it home. Dr. Chen sat quietly for a moment, letting Sarah's words settle in the space between them. He had heard similar sentiments before, from other veterans who carried invisible wounds alongside their physical scars. The weight of survivors' guilt was something he understood all too well. Sarah, he said, using her first name for the first time, those Marines you served with, what do you think they would want for you right now? She turned her head away, staring at the wall instead of meeting his eyes. They'd want me to do my job, and what job is that? Taking care of people who need help. Her voice was steady, but Dr. Chen could hear the strain underneath. There's a veteran support group that meets at the community center. Guys coming back from Iraq, Afghanistan, some from earlier conflicts. They count on me to be there, to help them navigate the system, to just listen when they need someone who understands. Dr. Chen glanced at his watch. It was Tuesday evening, and he wondered if that was where she had been heading when the accident happened. Is that where you were going tonight? Sarah nodded slowly. Tommy Rodriguez, he's having a rough time. PTSD, nightmares, the whole package. His wife called me this afternoon, said he was talking about ending it all. I was on my way to check on him when some teenager ran a red light. The pieces began falling into place for Dr. Chen. Sarah wasn't just avoiding pain medication out of stoicism or pride. She was afraid that any delay, any sign of weakness might mean she wouldn't be available for someone who needed her more. Did someone call him? Let him know you were in an accident? No. Sarah's response was immediate and sharp. And you can't either. If Tommy knows I'm hurt, he'll blame himself. He's already hanging on by a thread. Dr. Chen understood her dilemma, but as a physician, he also knew she needed proper care. Her x-rays had revealed more than just the obvious injuries. There were signs of chronic pain that she had been hiding, old wounds that hadn't healed properly, stress fractures that suggested she had been pushing her body beyond its limits for months. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. When was the last time you slept through the night? She was quiet for so long that he thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I don't really sleep much anymore. Maybe 3-4 hours at a time. Nightmares. Sometimes. She closed her eyes. Mostly, I just lie there thinking about all the things I could have done differently. Dr. Chen recognized the signs of someone who had been running on empty for far too long. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just a veteran dealing with physical injuries from a motorcycle accident. She was a woman who had appointed herself the caretaker for everyone except herself, and she was burning out. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Nurse Jessica peered in, looking apologetic. Dr. Chen? There's a man here asking about Mrs. Mitchell. Says his name is Frank Williams and that she was supposed to meet him tonight. Sarah's eyes flew open, panic flickering across her features. Tell him I'm not here. Sarah, Dr. Chen said firmly. Who is Frank Williams? Another vet from the group. He helps me keep an eye on the younger guys. She tried to sit up, wincing as the movement aggravated her ribs. If Frank is here, it means something's wrong with Tommy. Dr. Chen made a decision. Jessica, send Mr. Williams in, but let him know that Mrs. Mitchell is a patient and needs to rest. Doc, you don't understand, Sarah protested. These guys, they've been through hell. They don't need to see me like this. Maybe it's time you let someone else help you for a change. Frank Williams was a tall, graying man in his 50s who moved with the careful gait of someone whose knees had seen too many long marches. The moment he saw Sarah on the hospital bed, his weathered face creased with concern. Jesus, Sarah, what happened? He approached the bed like he was approaching a wounded animal, his voice gentle despite his obvious worry. Just a fender bender, Frank. Nothing serious. Sarah's automatic response was so quick it sounded rehearsed. Frank's eyes took in the road rash on her arm, the way she held her shoulder, the pallor in her complexion. Bullshit. You look like you went 10 rounds with a freight train. He turned to Dr. Chen. How bad is it, Doc? Dr. Chen found himself in an unusual position. Sarah was clearly trying to downplay her injuries, but Frank seemed like someone who would see through any attempt to sugarcoat the situation. She has some significant injuries that need attention, he said carefully, but she's stable. Good. Frank pulled a chair up to the bedside and sat down heavily. Because we've got a problem and I need you thinking straight. Sarah's entire body tensed. Tommy? Tommy's okay for now, but we've got 2 new guys at tonight's meeting, fresh back from their last deployment. One of them, kid named Marcus, he's in bad shape. Started having a panic attack during group. Couldn't breathe, couldn't calm down. The other guys didn't know what to do. Frank paused, running a hand through his gray hair. I did what I could, used some of the techniques you taught us, but it wasn't enough. The kid ended up in the emergency room across town. They sedated him and sent him home with a bottle of pills and a referral to the VA. Sarah closed her eyes, and Dr. Chen could see her calculating, planning, trying to figure out how to fix a situation while lying injured in a hospital bed. Sarah, Frank continued, his voice getting quieter. The kid asked for you specifically. Said someone told him you were the person to talk to, that you'd understand what he was going through. I need to call him, Sarah said, struggling to sit up again despite the obvious pain it caused. No, Dr. Chen interjected. You need to rest and let your body heal. Frank looked between them, sensing the tension. Doc, I don't know what Sarah's told you about what she does for us, but it's not just a hobby. She's saved more lives in that community center than most people save in a lifetime. I understand that, Dr. Chen replied. But she can't help anyone if she doesn't take care of herself first. You sound like my old Navy psychiatrist, Sarah muttered. Frank's eyebrows shot up. You saw a Navy shrink? Sarah looked uncomfortable, as if she had revealed more than she intended. Everyone who comes back gets evaluated. Standard procedure. But Frank had served long enough to read between the lines. Sarah, what happened over there? And don't give me the standard I did my job routine. I've been watching you for months and you carry yourself like someone who's seen the worst of it. For the first time since she had arrived at the hospital, Sarah looked truly vulnerable. The mask of competent control slipped and both men could see the exhaustion and pain she had been hiding. Sarah stared at her hands, which were clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned white. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of monitors and the distant sounds of the busy emergency department. Frank and Dr. Chen waited, sensing that she was wrestling with something much larger than her physical injuries. I wasn't just a regular corpsman, she finally said, her voice so quiet they had to lean forward to hear her. I was attached to a Marine recon unit. Special operations. Frank let out a low whistle. Marine reconnaissance units were elite forces that operated in the most dangerous areas, often behind enemy lines. For a Navy corpsman to be selected for such duty meant she was among the very best. How long? Dr. Chen asked. 4 years active duty, 3 deployments to Afghanistan. The last one was... She paused, searching for words. The last one was different. Dr. Chen had seen enough combat veterans to know that when someone said a deployment was different, it usually meant something had gone very wrong. The haunted look in Sarah's eyes confirmed his suspicions. We were operating in a valley north of Sangin, Sarah continued, her voice taking on the flat, emotionless tone that people used when recounting trauma. Intelligence said it was clear, but intelligence was wrong. We walked into an ambush. Frank reached over and placed a gentle hand on her arm. You don't have to tell us this, Sarah. Yes, I do. She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. Because you asked why I can't just rest and take care of myself. This is why. She took a shaky breath and continued. My unit was 12 Marines and me. We were pinned down for 18 hours. No air support, no backup, just us and about 50 Taliban fighters who had us surrounded. The beeping of the heart monitor increased slightly, and Dr. Chen noticed Sarah's breathing becoming more rapid. She was reliving the experience as she spoke. One by one, my boys started getting hit. First it was Corporal Jensen. took a round through the shoulder. Then Private Martinez caught shrapnel from an RPG. Then Sergeant Williams got shot in the leg. Frank's eyes widened at the name. Williams? Any relation to me? Sarah shook her head. Different Williams. But he was about your age, had kids back home just like you do. She closed her eyes. I kept moving between them, trying to keep everyone stable using whatever supplies I had. But the casualties kept mounting. Dr. Chen watched her vital signs on the monitor, ready to intervene if she became too distressed. But he also recognized that sometimes talking about trauma was necessary for healing. By hour 12, I had 7 wounded Marines and was running out of medical supplies. The Taliban knew they had us trapped, so they just kept taking shots whenever one of us moved. It was like they were playing with us. Sarah's hands were shaking now, and she pressed them flat against her thighs to still them. That's when Lieutenant Morrison made the call. He decided to make a run for higher ground, try to get to a position where we could call for extraction. How many made it? Frank asked, though from Sarah's expression he already suspected the answer. 3. Morrison, Private Jackson, and me. Her voice broke slightly. I lost 9 Marines that day, Frank. 9 boys who trusted me to keep them alive, and I couldn't do it. The room fell completely silent. Frank stared at Sarah with new understanding, finally grasping the weight she had been carrying. Dr. Chen felt a familiar ache in his chest, the same feeling he got whenever he encountered a fellow veteran who had survived when others didn't. Sarah, Frank said slowly, that's not your fault. You know that, right? Do I? She replied, her voice sharp with pain. Because I've replayed that day 1,000 times, and I can think of 100 things I could have done differently. Maybe if I had been faster, better, smarter. Stop. Dr. Chen's voice was firm but kind. I've been where you are, Sarah. I've lost patients under fire, good people who deserve to go home. And I've learned something that it took me years to accept. Sarah looked at him, waiting. You can't save everyone. No matter how skilled you are, no matter how hard you try. Sometimes the circumstances are bigger than any one person's ability to control them. What matters is that you did everything you could with what you had. But it wasn't enough, Sarah whispered. It was enough for 3 Marines who came home because of you, Frank pointed out. It was enough for Private Jackson, who I'm betting has a family somewhere that gets to see him because you kept him alive. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing their words. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. After I got back, I couldn't just go back to normal life. Civilian jobs, civilian problems, they all seemed so small compared to what I'd been through. But then I found the veteran support group, and I realized there were other people struggling with the same things I was. So you decided to help them, Dr. Chen said. I decided to make sure no one else had to go through what I went through alone. Sarah looked directly at Frank. Every time one of you guys calls me in the middle of the night, every time someone needs help navigating the VA system or just needs someone to listen, it feels like I'm finally doing something useful again. Frank shook his head slowly. Sarah, you've been useful all along, but you can't be the only one carrying this load. What happens to all those people you're helping if you run yourself into the ground? Before Sarah could answer, Dr. Chen's pager buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. I need to check on another patient, but I'll be back in a few minutes. Frank, can you stay with her? Of course, Doc. After Dr. Chen left, Frank moved his chair closer to Sarah's bed. Okay, now that it's just us, I want you to listen to me carefully. You've been taking care of everyone else for so long that you've forgotten how to let other people take care of you. Frank, I'm fine. No, you're not fine. You're exhausted, you're in pain, and you're trying to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. And you know what? Those 9 Marines you lost wouldn't want this for you. Sarah's eyes filled with tears she had been holding back. How can you be so sure? Because I knew Marines like them. Hell, I was a Marine like them. And if I didn't make it home, the last thing I'd want is for the corpsman who tried to save me to spend the rest of her life punishing herself for something that wasn't her fault. Frank leaned forward, his voice gentle but insistent. Those boys would want you to live, Sarah. Really live, not just exist to take care of other people. They'd want you to be happy, to heal, to find peace. For the first time since the accident, Sarah allowed herself to truly cry. The tears came slowly at first, then in a rush that surprised Sarah with its intensity. Frank handed her tissues from the bedside table and sat quietly, letting her release emotions she had been holding back for years. Dr. Chen, returning from his other patient, paused outside the door when he saw what was happening, giving them privacy for this important moment. "I'm sorry," Sarah said between sobs, wiping her eyes. "I don't usually fall apart like this." "Maybe that's the problem," Frank replied gently. "Maybe you need to fall apart once in a while." "Maybe we all do." Sarah laughed shakily through her tears. "You sound like the therapist the VA assigned me when I first got back. Smart therapist." "Did you listen to them?" "For a while. But then I got busy with the support group, and it seemed more important to help other people than to deal with my own problems." Frank nodded knowingly. Classic deflection. Take care of everyone else so you don't have to think about your own pain. Dr. Chen chose that moment to return, carrying Sarah's chart and a cup of coffee. He could see that something had shifted in the room's atmosphere. Sarah looked more fragile than before, but also somehow more real, as if she had stopped performing strength and started actually feeling her emotions. "How are you doing?" he asked, settling back into his chair. "Better, I think," Sarah replied. And for the first time she actually sounded like she meant it. "Frank's been reminding me that I'm human." "Good, because we need to talk about your treatment plan." Dr. Chen opened her chart. "The x-rays show that your shoulder dislocation was reduced properly, but you're going to need physical therapy to regain full range of motion. Your ribs will heal on their own, but you need to rest and avoid strenuous activity for at least 6 weeks." Sarah started to protest, but Dr. Chen held up a hand. "I'm not finished. I also noticed some old injuries that haven't healed properly. Your left wrist shows signs of repeated stress fractures, and there's evidence of chronic inflammation in your right knee. When was the last time you had a complete physical?" Sarah looked uncomfortable. "I don't really do doctors unless something's broken." "Well, something is broken," Dr. Chen said bluntly. "Several things, actually. And ignoring them isn't making them go away." Frank leaned forward. "Sarah, remember what you tell the guys in group about taking care of themselves?" "That's different. How?" Sarah struggled for an answer and couldn't find one that made sense. The same advice she gave to other veterans about seeking help, taking medication when needed, and prioritizing their health seemed impossible to apply to herself. Dr. Chen watched her internal struggle with professional interest. "Sarah, can I ask you something? When you were deployed, if one of your Marines had injuries like yours, what would you have done?" "I would have made sure they got proper medical attention," she replied automatically, even if they insisted they were fine. Especially if they insisted they were fine. Marines are terrible at admitting when they're hurt. And yet here you are insisting you're fine when you clearly need help. Dr. Chen's voice was kind but firm. "What makes you different from them?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing the contradiction he had pointed out. Finally, she sighed. "I don't know. Maybe because if I'm not the strong one, who's going to take care of everyone else?" "Maybe that's not your job anymore," Frank suggested. "Maybe it's time to let other people share that responsibility." Dr. Chen nodded in agreement. "Sarah, I've been thinking about what you told us earlier about the young veteran who had the panic attack tonight. What if there was a way for you to help him and take care of yourself at the same time?" Sarah looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if you stopped trying to be everyone's savior and started being their partner instead? What if you taught other people in your support group to help each other, instead of everyone relying solely on you?" Frank's eyes lit up with understanding. "Like training other people to do what you do." "Exactly. Sarah, you have valuable skills and experience, but you're only one person. If you trained 5 or 6 other veterans to recognize crisis situations and provide support, you could help far more people than you can reach on your own." Sarah considered this, her analytical mind working through the possibilities. "It would mean admitting that I can't handle everything myself." "It would mean admitting that you're human," Dr. Chen corrected. "And it would mean creating a sustainable system instead of burning yourself out trying to be everything to everyone." A knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Nurse Jessica peered in again, looking apologetic. "Dr. Chen, there's a young man here asking about Mrs. Mitchell. Says his name is Marcus and that he really needs to see her." Sarah sat up straighter, ignoring the pain the movement caused. "That's the veteran Frank was telling me about. The one who had the panic attack." Dr. Chen looked at Frank, who nodded. "Let him in, but just for a few minutes." Marcus was a thin young man who looked to be in his early 20s, with a short haircut and careful posture that marked him as recently discharged military. His eyes were red-rimmed and slightly unfocused, suggesting he was still feeling the effects of whatever medication the other hospital had given him. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Sarah with automatic military courtesy, "I'm sorry to bother you, but Frank said you might be able to help me understand what's happening to me." Sarah's protective instincts kicked in immediately. This young Marine looked lost and scared, probably feeling like his own mind was betraying him. She knew exactly how that felt. "Sit down, Marcus," she said gently, indicating the chair Frank had vacated. "Tell me about tonight." Marcus sat on the edge of the chair, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "We were just talking in group, sharing stories about our deployments. Someone mentioned an IED attack and suddenly I couldn't breathe. It was like I was back there, you know? I could smell the smoke, hear the explosions. My heart was racing so fast I thought I was having a heart attack." Sarah nodded understandingly. "How long since you got back?" 3 months. Everyone keeps telling me I should be grateful to be home safe, and I am, but..." He trailed off, struggling to find words. "But being home doesn't feel safe either," Sarah finished for him. Marcus looked up at her with surprise and relief. "Yes, exactly. How did you know?" "Because I felt the same way when I came back. Marcus, what you experienced tonight is called a panic attack, and it's a normal response to abnormal experiences. It doesn't mean you're weak or broken." Dr. Chen watched the interaction with professional fascination. Despite her own pain and exhaustion, Sarah had shifted into caregiver mode, her voice becoming stronger and more confident as she focused on helping the young veteran. "The doctors at the other hospital gave me some pills," Marcus said, pulling a prescription bottle from his pocket. "Said they would help with anxiety. But I don't want to just take pills and pretend everything's okay." "Good," Sarah said firmly. "Pills can be helpful as part of treatment, but they're not the whole answer. You need to learn coping strategies, ways to ground yourself when you start to feel overwhelmed." She spent the next 10 minutes teaching Marcus simple breathing techniques and grounding exercises, the same tools that had helped her during her own darkest moments. Frank and Dr. Chen watched quietly, both recognizing the irony of Sarah giving advice she rarely followed herself. As Marcus practiced the breathing exercises Sarah had taught him, Dr. Chen watched this exchange with growing excitement. As a physician, he had seen countless patients who recovered faster when they had a sense of purpose, when they felt useful rather than helpless. "That's actually brilliant," he said. "Sarah, you could create a peer support network where veterans help each other, instead of everything flowing through you." Marcus could work with newer veterans while more experienced group members mentor him. Sarah was quiet for several minutes, considering the possibility. The idea both excited and terrified her. It would mean letting go of control, trusting other people to handle situations she had always managed herself. "What if someone gets hurt while I'm not there?" she asked. "What if Marcus or someone else makes a mistake and a veteran doesn't get the help they need? What if you collapse from exhaustion and nobody gets help?" Frank countered. "Sarah, you're already making mistakes by trying to do everything yourself. You missed Marcus's crisis tonight because you were in an accident. What happens next time?" Marcus spoke up quietly. "Ma'am, if you had been there tonight, you would have helped me through the panic attack just like you did here. But you also would have gone home exhausted, probably not eaten dinner, maybe not slept. Tomorrow you'd be a little more worn down." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But if you teach me and Frank and maybe a few other guys how to handle these situations, then next time there's a crisis, one of us can step in. You get to rest, we get to feel useful, and the person in crisis still gets help." Sarah looked around the room at the 3 men who were trying to help her see a different way forward. Dr. Chen with his medical expertise and understanding of trauma, Frank with his years of experience and steady wisdom, and Marcus with his fresh perspective and willingness to learn. "You really think this could work?" she asked. "I think it's the only thing that will work long term," Dr. Chen replied. "Sarah, you're trying to be a one-person mental health system for an entire community of veterans. That's not sustainable, and it's not healthy for you or for them." Frank nodded in agreement. "We've all been enabling you, letting you carry the load because it was easier than stepping up ourselves. But that wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't good for the group either." "How do you mean?" "I mean that by always being the one with the answers, you've accidentally taught us that we can't handle problems ourselves. When someone like Marcus has a crisis and you're not available, we panic because we don't know what to do." Marcus looked embarrassed. "He's right. When I started having the panic attack tonight, everyone just stood around looking helpless. A couple of guys tried to calm me down, but they didn't really know how. If someone had known the techniques you just taught me, I might not have ended up in the emergency room. Sarah felt a shift in her thinking, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. She had been so focused on being indispensable that she had failed to build a system that could function without her. Okay, she said slowly. Let's say I agree to try this. Where do we start? Dr. Chen smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him all evening. We start with you accepting proper medical treatment and taking time to heal. You can't teach other people to take care of themselves if you're not doing it yourself. And while you're recovering, Frank added, Marcus and I can start reaching out to other group members, see who might be interested in learning peer counseling skills. Marcus nodded enthusiastically. I could practice the techniques you taught me tonight with some of the other new guys. Start building my confidence while you're getting better. For the first time since the accident, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not just the grim determination to get through another day, but actual hope that things could be different. You know what's crazy? She said. I've been so afraid of letting people down that I never considered I might be holding them back. Dr. Chen leaned forward. Sarah, those 9 Marines you lost in Afghanistan? The best way to honor their memory isn't to punish yourself forever. It's to use what you learned from that experience to help other people survive and thrive. Sarah closed her eyes, and for the first time when she thought about her fallen Marines, she didn't feel only guilt and pain. She felt something else too, a sense of purpose that wasn't built on self-destruction. All right, she said, opening her eyes and looking directly at Dr. Chen. What do I need to do to get better? Chen could see a visible change in the young man's demeanor. His shoulders relaxed, his hands unclenched, and the panicked look in his eyes began to fade. Sarah's voice remained calm and steady throughout, but Dr. Chen noticed she was favoring her injured shoulder more as the conversation continued. This actually helps, Marcus said with surprise after completing the grounding exercise. I feel more here, if that makes sense. It makes perfect sense, Sarah replied. When you're having a panic attack, your mind gets stuck in the past, reliving traumatic experiences. These techniques help bring you back to the present moment. Frank leaned forward from where he had been standing near the window. Marcus, I want you to remember something important. Sarah just taught you tools that took her years to learn, but she didn't learn them by herself. Marcus looked confused. What do you mean? I mean she had help from therapists, from other veterans, from people who understood what she was going through. There's no shame in needing support. Sarah shot Frank a warning look, but he continued anyway. In fact, Sarah is in this hospital bed right now because she's been so focused on taking care of everyone else that she forgot to take care of herself. Frank, Sarah said quietly, a note of irritation in her voice. No, Sarah. He needs to hear this. Frank turned back to Marcus. The woman who just helped you calm down hasn't slept properly in months. She's been pushing through physical pain and emotional exhaustion because she thinks she has to be strong for everyone else. Marcus looked between them, beginning to understand the dynamic. You mean she's dealing with the same stuff I am? Worse, Frank said bluntly. She was a combat medic attached to Marine recon units. She lost 9 Marines in an ambush and has been carrying that guilt for years. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling exposed and vulnerable. She had spent so much energy maintaining her image as the competent caregiver that having her own struggles laid bare felt like losing control. Dr. Chen intervened gently. Marcus, what Frank is trying to show you is that healing isn't about being strong all the time. It's about being honest about what you're going through and accepting help when you need it. Marcus studied Sarah's face, seeing past the composed exterior to the pain underneath. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Sarah nodded reluctantly. If I came to you tomorrow and said I was having panic attacks, couldn't sleep, and was refusing medical treatment because I thought I had to be strong for other people, what would you tell me? Sarah stared at him for a long moment, recognizing the trap he had set for her. I'd tell you that you can't help anyone else if you don't take care of yourself first. And I'd tell you that asking for help isn't weakness, it's intelligence, Marcus replied. Because that's what you just told me. Frank smiled, impressed by the young Marine's insight. Smart kid, Dr. Chen seized the moment. Sarah, Marcus has just demonstrated something important. He learned coping skills from you in 15 minutes that might have taken him weeks to learn from a textbook or a therapist. But he was able to help you see something about yourself that you've been blind to. What's your point? Sarah asked, though she was beginning to understand. My point is that you're more effective as a teacher and mentor when you're honest about your own struggles. Pretending to have all the answers doesn't help anyone. Showing people how to work through problems in real time does. Marcus nodded enthusiastically. Ma'am, knowing that someone like you, someone who's been through worse than I have, still struggles sometimes, it makes me feel less alone. Sarah felt tears threatening again, but this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of recognition, of finally understanding something that had been just out of reach. You know what's funny? She said quietly. I spent 4 years in the Navy learning to save lives under impossible conditions, but somehow I never learned how to save my own life. Maybe because saving your life and living your life are two different things, Dr. Chen suggested. Frank sat back down in the chair beside Sarah's bed. Sarah, I've got an idea. What if Marcus here became your first trainee? What do you mean? I mean, what if you taught him how to facilitate support groups, how to recognize when someone's in crisis, how to be a peer counselor? He's got fresh experience with what new veterans are going through, and you've got the skills and knowledge to guide him. Marcus leaned forward eagerly. I'd be honored to learn from you, ma'am. And maybe helping other people would help me too. Dr. Chen pulled out a prescription pad and began writing. First, you're going to accept pain medication for your injuries. Not because you're weak, but because managing pain properly helps your body heal faster. Sarah nodded reluctantly. Okay, but I don't want anything that will make me foggy or unable to think clearly. We'll start with something mild and adjust as needed. The goal is to keep you comfortable enough to rest, not to knock you unconscious. Dr. Chen continued writing. Second, you need to see an orthopedic specialist about your shoulder and knee. Those old injuries need proper treatment. And third, Frank interjected, you need to take at least 2 weeks off from the support group meetings. Sarah's automatic protest died on her lips when she saw the determined expressions on all 3 men's faces. 2 weeks seems like a long time. 2 weeks is nothing compared to the months it would take you to recover if you push yourself into a complete breakdown, Dr. Chen said firmly. Besides, it will give Marcus and the other group members a chance to practice the skills you're going to teach them. Marcus leaned forward eagerly. Ma'am, what if we use these 2 weeks to set up a proper training program? I could work with Frank to identify other group members who might want to become peer counselors. Sarah considered this. The idea of stepping back was terrifying, but she was beginning to see that her fear wasn't really about the group failing without her. It was about admitting that she wasn't indispensable, that other people could do the work she had been jealously guarding. What kind of training are you thinking about? She asked. Frank pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app. Well, you could start by writing down everything you know about crisis intervention, what warning signs to look for, how to de-escalate someone who's having a panic attack or talking about suicide. And I could help by sharing what it feels like from the other side, Marcus added. What actually helps when someone's in crisis versus what people think helps. Dr. Chen watched this planning session with satisfaction. Sarah was still pale and obviously in pain, but there was an energy in her voice that hadn't been there earlier. Having a concrete plan seemed to be helping her accept the idea of stepping back. There's one more thing we need to discuss, he said quietly. Sarah, have you ever talked to anyone about what happened in Afghanistan? The room fell silent. Sarah's shoulders tensed and she looked down at her hands. I told you what happened. You told us the facts of what happened. But have you ever talked to anyone about how it made you feel? Have you processed the emotional impact of losing those Marines? I don't really see the point in dwelling on it. Frank shook his head. Sarah, you're not dwelling on it. You're living it every single day. Every time you push yourself beyond your limits, every time you refuse help, every time you try to save everyone else, you're still back in that valley trying to save those Marines. Marcus looked between them, beginning to understand the deeper layers of Sarah's situation. Ma'am, when I was having my panic attack tonight, you helped me by acknowledging what I was feeling and teaching me tools to manage it. But you've never done that for yourself, have you? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I tried therapy when I first got back, but talking about it just made everything feel more real. It was easier to stay busy, to focus on helping other people, but it didn't make the feelings go away, Dr. Chen observed. It just pushed them underground where they could eat away at you. Maybe, Sarah admitted. but I don't know how to do anything else. Being strong, being the one who has the answers, that's who I've been for so long. I don't know who I am if I'm not that person." Frank reached over and squeezed her uninjured hand. "You're still the person who ran into gunfire to save Marines. You're still the person who's helped dozens of veterans find their way home. But maybe you can be those things without destroying yourself in the process. The Marines you saved, the veterans you've helped, they didn't fall in love with your strength," Marcus said thoughtfully. "They fell in love with your compassion, your understanding, your willingness to be there when they needed someone. You don't lose those qualities by taking care of yourself." Dr. Chen made a note in Sarah's chart. "I'm going to refer you to a therapist who specializes in military trauma, someone who understands PTSD and survivor's guilt." "I don't have PTSD," Sarah said automatically. All three men looked at her with raised eyebrows. "Sarah," Dr. Chen said gently, "you have nightmares. You avoid talking about your combat experiences. You have hypervigilance about other people's safety, and you've been using work as a way to avoid processing your own trauma. Those are classic symptoms, but I'm functional. I help people. You're highly functional, which is actually a common presentation of PTSD in military medics and other caregivers. You channel your symptoms into helping others, which looks healthy from the outside but is actually a form of avoidance." Frank nodded in recognition. "It's like you've been treating your own psychological wounds with aspirin instead of surgery. It manages the pain enough to keep going, but it doesn't fix the underlying problem." Sarah sat with this information feeling a mix of relief and terror. Relief that there was a name for what she had been experiencing, that she wasn't just weak or broken. Terror that addressing it might mean facing emotions she had been running from for years. If I do this, if I get help and step back from the group, what happens if someone really needs me and I'm not available? Marcus answered immediately. The same thing that would happen if you were in this hospital bed and couldn't help anyway. Other people step up, they do their best, and the world doesn't end. And you know what? Frank added. Sometimes other people's best is actually better than what you could have done alone. Marcus handled his panic attack tonight with tools you taught him in 15 minutes. That's not because you're not good at what you do. It's because teaching someone to fish works better than just giving them fish. Dr. Chen closed Sarah's chart with a snap. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here overnight for observation. Tomorrow morning, you're going home with pain medication, physical therapy referrals, and the phone number of a good therapist. And Marcus and I are going to spend the next 2 weeks setting up a proper support system for the group, Frank continued. When you come back, you'll be coming back as a teacher and mentor, not as the sole person responsible for everyone's well-being. Sarah looked around the room at these three men who had somehow managed to accomplish what years of VA, counselors, and well-meaning friends had failed to do. They had shown her a path forward that didn't require her to abandon her mission of helping veterans, but didn't require her to sacrifice herself either. You really think this can work? I think you've already proven it can work, Dr. Chen replied. You helped Marcus tonight while you were injured and exhausted. Imagine what you could accomplish if you were healthy and had a team of trained peers working with you. For the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't carrying the entire weight of the world on her shoulders. 3 months later, Sarah stood at the front of the community center's main room, watching as 12 veterans arranged their chairs in a circle. Her shoulder had healed completely, though she still attended physical therapy twice a week. More importantly, the dark circles under her eyes had faded, and she had gained back the 15 pounds she had lost during her months of barely eating and constant stress. All right, everyone, let's get started, she said, settling into her own chair. But unlike the old days when she would have been the only person leading the discussion, tonight she was flanked by Marcus on her right and Frank on her left. Marcus had proven to be a natural at peer counseling. His recent experience with panic attacks and PTSD made him particularly effective with newly returned veterans, while his military bearing helped him gain instant credibility with skeptical Marines and soldiers. Before we dive into tonight's topic, Sarah continued, I want everyone to remember our new buddy system. Each of you has been paired with someone else in the group. If you're having a rough week, you call your buddy before you call me. A gruff older veteran named Pete raised his hand. What if our buddy's not available? Frank fielded this question. Then you call one of the peer counselors. Marcus, myself, Jenny, or Tom. Sarah is still here for emergencies, but she's not the only lifeline anymore. Jenny Rodriguez, a former Army medic who had joined the group 2 months earlier, nodded from across the circle. She had initially been reluctant to take on a leadership role, but Sarah's patient mentoring had helped her recognize her own strengths. "The buddy system saved my butt last week," admitted a young Navy veteran named David. "I was having a really bad night. Lots of flashbacks. Instead of suffering alone or bothering Sarah at 2 in the morning, I called my buddy Mike here." Mike, a former Marine who had been with the group for over a year, smiled. "We talked for an hour, used some of the grounding techniques Sarah taught us. Dave got through the night, and honestly, helping him made me feel better about my own stuff." Sarah felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with professional pride and everything to do with genuine happiness. This was what healing looked like. Not one person desperately trying to save everyone else, but a community of people supporting each other. "How's the new job working out, Sarah?" asked Tom, another peer counselor who had been trained in the program's second wave. Sarah smiled. She had taken a part-time position at the VA hospital, teaching crisis intervention skills to medical staff and social workers. The work utilized her expertise while giving her a more sustainable schedule. "It's good. Different from this, but good. I'm actually teaching some of the techniques we use here to VA counselors. Turns out that understanding military culture makes a big difference in how effectively you can help veterans." Marcus leaned forward. "Tell them about the training program." "Oh, right." Sarah's smile grew wider. "The VA has asked me to develop a formal peer support training curriculum. They want to implement programs like ours at VA facilities across 3 states. The room erupted in pleased murmurs and congratulations. Frank whistled low. "Look at that. Our little experiment is going nationwide." "It's not just mine," Sarah said firmly. "This program works because all of you made it work. Every person in this room contributed something essential." Dr. Chen, who had started attending meetings as a guest speaker on medical topics, nodded approvingly from his seat near the back. He had watched Sarah's transformation over the past 3 months with professional fascination and personal satisfaction. The therapy had been difficult at first. Sarah had spent the first several sessions sitting rigidly in the chair, insisting she didn't need to be there. But gradually, with the help of a therapist who specialized in military trauma, she had begun to process the guilt and grief she had been carrying. The breakthrough had come when her therapist asked her to write letters to each of the 9 Marines she had lost. Not letters of apology, but letters of update, telling them about her life and the veterans she had helped since coming home. "You know what I realized?" Sarah had told Dr. Chen during one of her follow-up appointments. "Those Marines didn't die so I could spend the rest of my life punishing myself. They died fighting for something they believed in. The best way to honor them is to live a life they would be proud of." Tonight, as Sarah watched the group members support each other with skills she had taught them, she felt that sense of pride and purpose without the crushing weight of sole responsibility. "All right," she said, bringing the group's attention back to the evening's agenda. "Tonight we're talking about building healthy relationships. Not just romantic relationships, but friendships, family connections, professional relationships. Marcus, you want to start us off?" Marcus nodded and turned to address the group. "When I first got back, I thought I had to handle everything alone. I was afraid that if people knew what I was really going through, they'd think I was weak or broken." Several heads around the circle nodded in recognition. "But over the past few months, I've learned that the strongest thing you can do is let people help you. And the weird thing is, when you let people help you, it makes them feel stronger too." Pete, the gruff older veteran, spoke up. "Kid's right. I've been carrying my load alone for 20 years, ever since I got back from Vietnam. Always figured my problems were my problems. But helping some of you younger guys with your stuff has made me feel useful again." "It's like what Sarah always says," added Jenny. "You can't pour from an empty cup. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't really take care of anyone else." Sarah listened to the discussion flow naturally around the circle, with group members sharing insights, offering support, and providing practical advice to each other. Frank caught her eye and winked, and she realized he was thinking the same thing she was. This was what success looked like. Not one heroic individual sacrificing everything for others, but a community of people who had learned to care for themselves and each other. As the meeting wound down, Marcus approached her with a thoughtful expression. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Of course. And Marcus, you can call me Sarah. We've been through this." He grinned sheepishly. "Sorry, old habits. Sarah, do you ever regret the way things used to be? When you were handling everything yourself?" Sarah considered the question seriously. Sometimes I miss feeling indispensable, but I don't miss feeling exhausted all the time, or lying awake at night worrying about everyone, and I definitely don't miss the loneliness. Loneliness? When you're the person everyone comes to for help, but you never ask anyone for help yourself, you end up very isolated. I have real friendships now, people I can call when I'm struggling. That's worth more than feeling indispensable. Dr. Chen approached them as the room began to empty. How are you feeling, Sarah? Really? She paused to take inventory. Her shoulder felt fine. She had slept 7 hours the night before. She had eaten 3 real meals that day. She was looking forward to a weekend hiking trip with some friends from work. I feel like myself again, she said, or maybe like myself for the first time. The person I was before, trying to save everyone, that wasn't really me. That was just my trauma wearing a cape. Dr. Chen laughed. I like that. Mind if I steal it for other patients? Please do. As they walked toward the parking lot together, Frank fell into step beside them. You know what's funny? The group is helping more people now than it ever did when you were running it single-handedly. How do you figure? Because now we have 12 people who know how to help instead of one person who was burning out. And each of those 12 people is going to go out into the world and help their families, their co-workers, their neighbors. The ripple effect is enormous. Sarah looked back at the community center where the lights were just being turned off. 6 months ago, she would have been the last person to leave, staying late to check on anyone who seemed to be struggling. Tonight she was leaving with friends, confident that the people who needed support had multiple options for getting it. You know what I'm most grateful for? She said as they reached their cars. What's that? Dr. Chen asked. That motorcycle accident. If it hadn't happened, I might have kept going the way I was until I completely fell apart. The accident forced me to stop and ask for help. Frank shook his head with amazement. Only you would be grateful for getting hit by a car. Sarah laughed, a sound that had become much more frequent in recent months. I'm not grateful for getting hit by a car. I'm grateful for everything that happened afterward. I'm grateful for doctors who saw past my stubbornness, for friends who refused to let me carry everything alone, and for the chance to learn that asking for help isn't giving up. It's growing up. As she drove home that night, Sarah thought about the 9 Marines she had lost in that valley in Afghanistan. For the first time when she thought about them, her predominant emotion wasn't guilt or grief. It was gratitude. Gratitude for the time she had served with them, for the lessons they had taught her about courage and sacrifice, and for the way their memory continued to inspire her to help others. She was finally living a life they would be proud of. Not a life of endless self-sacrifice and suffering, but a life of purpose, connection, and healing. A life where helping others didn't require destroying herself.